Both candidates kicked off week 4 in the outdoors. Scott Morrison marking the end of Ramadan at a Sydney mosque, where one woman begged him to help her family trapped in Afghanistan.
Maria will be able to work with you. We are bringing thousands and thousands of people from Afghanistan. As the minister, who has been very involved.
Meanwhile, Anthony Albanese was up north at Queensland's Labor Day celebrations.
Hey, mate. Hey, how are you?
Albanese will be hoping for a different kind of Labor Day on May 21, with the latest Newspoll showing Labor holding the lead in both the primary and two-party preferred vote. But Morrison is still ahead as preferred PM. The opposition leader today defending the policy to help would-be homeowners by buying up to a 40% stake in some private properties.
Our housing policy is good policy. How do we know that? Because we know that it works. In the past, Scott Morrison has been positive about it.
There was a new policy from the coalition. It will raise the threshold for the seniors concession card, giving 50,000 more older Australians access to cheaper healthcare and utility bills.
This is a permanent change. It's indexed, and it means that Australians and more Australians will continue to get access to the Commonwealth Seniors Health Card.
Labor immediately announced it would match the policy.
Our methods have not differed as much as you pretend.
The PM returned to his favourite method of literally currying favour with voters.
Strong curry, strong economy, stronger future.
Does anyone else think that chicken looks raw?
But with interest rates set to rise tomorrow, Morrison denied that his goose was cooked.
It's not about politics. What happens tomorrow deals with what people pay on their mortgages. I mean, sometimes you guys always see things through a totally political lens. I don't, and Australians don't.
Joining us now is Labor MP Tanya Plibersek and Liberal Senator Jane Hume. Welcome, ladies. First question to you, Jane. Your government has always said there's lower interest rates under the coalition. So how can the PM now say it's not political?
There's potentially an interest rate rise going to be announced tomorrow by the RBA, but we know the RBA makes its decisions independently of government, always has, always should, always will, and it does that on the basis of the circumstances at the time, things like inflation rates, wage growth, and also whether some of the cost pressures that we're seeing from overseas, things like fuel prices, are permanent or temporary, or whether they're structural or whether they're transient. And that's what the RBA will consider when it makes its decisions tomorrow. The interest rate is coming off historical lows, a 0.1% cash rate. I should just remind Anthony Albanese of that, a 0.1% cash rate is an historical low. We've never seen interest rates quite so low. That was a COVID response by the RBA. It was made to encourage people to borrow when they needed to. But now, as we move out of as we recover from COVID and the economy moves on, it's time for interest rates to respond and to normalise. We expected them to normalise.
Tanya, there's now predictions that we could get an interest rate rise every month between now and Christmas. The Daily Telegraph's reporting that tomorrow. So if you win in 3 weeks' time, there's nothing you can do about that, and you're going to cop the blame, aren't you?
Well, we know for sure that interest rates will go up, whether it's tomorrow or next month. And what you see from Scott Morrison, once again, is he's very happy to take credit if there's a good number in the economy, but he runs a mile from responsibility if there's a bad number. What we know too is that the interest rate rises come on top of really substantial cost of living pressures on ordinary families. We saw the inflation rate last week, more than 5%, and this comes on top of wages going backwards. And we've had Liberal ministers saying that low wages are a deliberate design feature of this government's economic management. So it's the triple whammy of these things hitting higher prices, higher interest rates and lower wages that are putting pressure on families everywhere.
The point I'm making, Tanya, is you can't do anything about it when you're in government. It's independent, the Reserve, and the banks will put the rates up when the Reserve puts the rate up.
Yeah, we can run an efficient and productive economy, and this government has actually taxed more, borrowed more and spent more than any government in the history of Australia and delivered less for it. So we need to make sure that when we're investing in our economy, that is a productive investment. We're investing, for example, in education and increasing the productivity of our businesses to make sure that the economy is growing strongly.
Well, actually, Tanya, you know, we have a AAA credit rating from all three credit rating agencies, and what that means, that's a little bit like an international tick of approval for your economic management. For your economic management. Tanya, it's been 9 years since you were in government. 9 years.
That, Jane?
So we have an international tick of approval for our economic management, which is one of the reasons why. Interest rates have been able to stay as low as they are for as long as they have. And one of the things that the RBA will take into account when it makes its decision to raise interest rates tomorrow and keep inflation within that band of 2 to 3%. That's how you run a strong economy. That's how you make for a stronger future.
Jane, those AAA credit ratings were won for the first time by Labor when we were last in government. 3 AAA credit ratings won for the first time by Labor, never under the
Tanya,
Liberals.
we've just had a global recession and a global pandemic, and yet we've come out the other side with a strong economy. And
so are you telling people that they're doing well?
Folks, I think it's clear that we have different views on this between the two of you. I do want to take us...
This is how out of touch the Liberals are, right? They think things are great.
I do want to take us to another issue because it's emerged today that the Prime Minister's been sending letters to religious leaders promising he'll reintroduce the Religious Discrimination Bill without protections for LGBTQI people. Senator Hume, can you just be clear with us? Is that government policy taking to this election that you'll reintroduce that legislation if you win?
We were committed to introducing religious discrimination to make sure that people of faith could practice their faith
but that's,
without
sorry, Senator, that's not my question. Is it your policy going to this election that you'll introduce that legislation if you win?
That's what the Prime Minister has said.
And without any provisions to safeguard for young gay, lesbian, trans students?
We don't want to see anybody discriminated against, whether they be people of faith or whether they be young people and students. We want to make sure that the appropriate safeguards are there, whether they be
but you're saying you won't allow
within the Sex
any
Discrimination Act. Within the Sex Discrimination Act, which is where those protections should be strengthened.
Tanya, your response?
Well, Labor never wants to see people discriminated against on the basis of their religion, and we support legal protections against discrimination on the basis of religion. But this is a protection from discrimination. It's not a legal ability to discriminate against others. And the Prime Minister said before the last election that he would offer protection to gay and lesbian students. If he's retreating on that, I think it's important that he's upfront about that with the Australian community. I don't think most Australians support any right to discriminate against people on the basis of their sexuality.
Jane, Tanya, before we let you go, will either of you promise to provide extra funding for salmonella poisoning? Because there's been some pretty dodgy photos of some uncooked chicken floating around on Instagram today.
I promise you I won't cook a curry that looks like that.
I think it's very important we have high food standards.
Jane Hume, Tanya Plibersek, always a pleasure talking to you both. Thank you very much.
Great to be with you.